In your book were written all the days that were formed for me when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. I try to count them, they are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. And from Romans 11:33-36. I'm reading this from the Contemporary English Version. Who can measure the wealth and wisdom and knowledge of God? Who can understand his decisions or explain what he does? Has anyone known the thoughts of the Lord or given him advice? Has anyone loaned something to the Lord that must be repaid? Everything comes from the Lord. All things were made because of him and will return to him. Praise the Lord forever. Amen.
Amen.
And finally, an interesting story that we skipped on Transfiguration Sunday this year, but is Matthew's account of that interesting, unexplainable event. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome with fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Get up and do not be afraid. And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus by himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, Tell no one about this vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. And the disciples asked him, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? He replied, Elijah is indeed coming and will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come. And they did not recognize him, and they did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man is about to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them about John the Baptist. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
How many of you are Dr. Seuss fans? Okay, you're in for some Dr. Seuss. And interestingly enough, and I have Dr. Scott Black Johnston, the senior pastor of Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church, to thank for these 2 illustrations that you're going to get today. It just so happened, interestingly enough, since we were there and we worshiped there when we were in New York, I get a weekly email about the coming week's activities at Fifth Avenue. And it just so happened that last Sunday, Scott preached on what we don't know about God. And he used these illustrations. And I'm really glad he did, because they were perfect for my purposes. Okay, so what was interesting was he lifted up a Dr. Seuss book that I've never heard of. And I discovered, and this is the library's copy, and as you can see, it's been well loved and well used. And it's got torn pages and dirty pages and rounded off corners. This book is only 4 years younger than me. Yep, and it's called On Beyond Zebra. How many of you know this one? Oh good, I'm glad some of you do. So I'm going to read just part of it to you. It is a relatively long Dr. Seuss book, but you're going to get some of it. Okay, so well, get to the first page here. Oh, and someone practiced their ABCs on the on the flyleaf, which I love. Okay, so you see this child at the blackboard writing his alphabet, and this is the guy who's talking. Said Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell. I like these Irish names on St. Patrick's Day weekend. Said Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell, my very young friend who is learning to spell. The A is for ape, and the B is for bear. The C is for camel, and the H is for hare. The M is for mouse, and the R is for rat. I know all the 26 letters like that. Through to Z is for zebra. I know them all well, said Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell. So now I know everything anyone knows, from beginning to end, from the start to the close, because Z is as far as the alphabet goes. Then he almost fell flat on his floor, face on the floor, when I picked up the chalk and drew one letter more. A letter he never had dreamed of before. And I said, you can stop if you want with the Z, because most people stop with the Z, but not me. In the places I go, there are things that I see that I never could spell if I stopped with the Z. I'm telling you this because you're one of my friends. My alphabet starts where your alphabet ends. My alphabet starts with this letter called Yuz. It's the letter I use to spell Yuzamatas. You'd be sort of surprised what there is to be found once you go beyond Z and start poking around. And he goes on, you can see how well up. And he goes on and provides 20 more letters beyond Z. So we're not going to read all of them. I'll give you a sample here. If you stay home with zebra, you're stuck in a rut. But on beyond zebra, you're anything but. Why, I know a fine, fancy letter called fuddle. I use it in spelling Miss Fuddle-dee-Duddle. And oh, what a bird of a bird of a bird of. Her tail is the longest that's ever been heard of. So long and so fancy she'd be in a fix if she didn't have helpers. It takes about 6 to tag along, hoisting Miss Fuddle-dee-Duddle's wonderful tail out of muddle-dee puddles. And Fnad is for fnatters. And oh, are they sad. Oh. The big one you see has the smaller one's shadow. The shadow the small Fadner has should be his. I don't understand it, but that's how it is. A terrible mix-up in shadows. Gee whiz. And way, way past Z is a letter called itch. And the itch is for ichthyopods, animals which race around back and forth and back through the air on a very high sidewalk between here and there. They're afraid to stay there. They're afraid to stay here. They think there is too far. They think here is too near. And since here is too near and out there is too far, they are scared to roost wheresoever they are, etc., etc. And finally, he gets to this place. The places I took him. I tried hard to tell young Conrad Cornelius O'Donnell Odell a few brand new wonderful words he might spell. I led him around and I tried hard to show there are things beyond Z that most people don't know. I took him past zebra, as far as yes, I could. And I think perhaps, maybe, I did him some good. Because finally he said, this is really great stuff. And I guess the old alphabet isn't enough. Now, the letters he uses are something to see. Most people still stop at the Z, but not he. And then he ends by asking, what do you think we should call this one, anyhow? This one that Conrad made up. Our first two scripture texts for today describe how much bigger God is than our ability to comprehend. How much God goes beyond Z is for zebra. And the third one, the third scripture, the Transfiguration story, brings that reality to experience. The Transfiguration is a well-known story, but remains mysterious. Peter, James, and John are with Jesus on a high mountain, and suddenly they are faced with a Jesus that they can't comprehend. I don't know that they see all of God's glory in Jesus, but they see way more than they're used to seeing. And it's overwhelming to them. And in that glory, they suddenly even see Elijah and Moses. They understand how God has come together in Jesus. And they're terrified. And Peter did what people often do when they're terrified. They try to put it in a box. And his box was, let me make you some houses. This is just great. Let's just stay here. Which, of course, breaks the spell. And they hear God speak. And God says, this is my beloved Son. Listen to him. And then suddenly, Jesus is patting them on the back and saying, it's all right. Don't be afraid. It's me, and I'm here. If we put ourselves in the disciples' shoes, you realize that they had quite a night. There's a lot that went beyond Z. A lot they didn't understand, that they could not possibly comprehend. And you can see them trying to make sense of what's happening. We like explanations for things in our lives. Explanations give us a sense of control, a sense of directing the events of our days. When we're confronted with things that have no explanation, we get scared. We make up explanations. We try to fit them into categories so we don't have to live with the mystery. Jesus frees us from having to explain and understand everything we experience. He invites us, not always, to have to explain life, but sometimes just to experience it, to venture on beyond Z is for zebra. In fact, Jesus tells the three that have witnessed the Transfiguration that they should not tell others about it until when? After his own resurrection. Now, isn't it interesting that he tells them that and they don't ask about that? They ask about Elijah, because Elijah they can understand. They don't want to think about him being killed, much less resurrected. That's way beyond Z. Okay? But in the resurrection story, if you recall, the women who encounter another new Jesus they hadn't seen before, who first to encounter the reality of the resurrection, what's their response? Fear. Fear. They're talking to a dead man. They have no way to understand, to comprehend what they're experiencing. And their immediate reaction, like ours often is fear. But Jesus again understands and speaks peace into their fear. Max Dupree was a wonderful Christian but businessman. He was the CEO of Herman Miller Furniture back in their heyday. He said, "We do not grow by knowing all the answers, but by living with the questions." We do not grow by knowing all the answers, but by living with the questions. Ted Foote and Alice Thornburg put out a wonderful book that was entitled Being Presbyterian in the Bible Belt. And it was a sort of a tongue-in-cheek but wonderful book about how to answer those fundamental questions about when were you saved and what do you weirdos that are called Presbyterians believe. So they've recently put out this new book called Being Disciples of Jesus in a .com World. And the subtitle is A Theological Survival Guide for Youth, Adults, and Other Confused Christians. It's a great book, as was the first one. But in the introduction to this book, where they're explaining their purpose in this book, they say, theological reflection is the work of every Christian. God calls us to think and act and struggle and follow a way of life that takes seriously questions of meaning and mystery. Theology is a work of imagination in conversation with social and historical realities. Our call as Christians is not to fear the unexplainable, but to seek the unexplainable with three things. Three things. The first one is imagination. And Dr. Seuss helped us out with that one. Imagination. The second one is humility. And the third is trust. So Dr. Seuss has already challenged us to free our imaginations. We're going to turn to a very different book for our inspiration to humility. And I'm going to use object lesson here. A very 19th century object lesson. No fancy screens for us Presbyterians. Any of you ever heard of a little book, a novella, written in 1884 by Edwin Abbott called Flatland? I can see Sandy is one who has heard of this book, and I know why she has heard of it. And its subtitle is A Romance of Many Dimensions. Edwin Abbott was a schoolmaster in England, and he wrote this little book as a social critique of Victorian classism. It never really gained any traction among social scientists, but it has really become a classic with mathematicians and physicists and child development folks to some extent. So here's my low-tech object lesson that tells you the story of Flatland. By the way, it was made into a movie in 2007, which you might be able to find. Okay, so the primary character is Square. Square lives in a two-dimensional land where all of its people are shapes. Sadly, women are just a line between 2 points, but it is Victorian. Okay, so Square is two-dimensional. He visits line land in a dream. Line land is a one-dimensional land where there is nothing but a line and points on the line. So when he visits it, he is perceived only by the inhabitants of line land as two dots, 2 points on the line, where his square meets their line. They cannot understand that there is more to square beyond those 2 points. And the more he tries to explain to them that there is a place where there are 2 dimensions and not just one, the angrier, then more frightened they become, until finally they threaten to kill him because he's talking nonsense. There couldn't possibly be another dimension beyond theirs. Okay, well, he wakes up when they threaten to kill him. And then, lo and behold, Square is visited by Sphere. And because Square, of course I can't hold this really flat, but because Square is only 2-dimensional, he can only experience Sphere as a circle. That place where Sphere intersects with his 2-dimensional land, his understanding, his perception. However, Sphere keeps talking to Square, and he moves in and out of the plane slowly until Square can see by the changing perception of his intersection with 2 dimensions that Sphere in fact does go beyond a 2-dimensional life, and that there is indeed a 3-dimensional land. Square then goes to visit Sphere's land with him and becomes entranced with this new concept of a 3-dimensional world. Square returns to his own 2-dimensional world and preaches 3-dimensionalism. But he's roundly rejected, no pun intended. In the end of the book, it's just a little short book, in the end of the book, Square and Sphere are having a conversation. And Square now, because Square is the one with the imagination and the humility to go beyond his own dimension. Square suggests to Sphere the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there are 4-dimensional worlds. Or maybe even 5. But Sphere stoutly dismisses anything beyond his own experience as utterly ridiculous. Of course, thanks to Albert Einstein, we now know that the 4th dimension is the element of time. And serious scientists today posit that there are as many as 10 dimensions or more in God's cosmos. Madeleine L'Engle, again, one of my favorites, her Wrinkle in Time has just been made into a new movie. It tells the tale of travel in huge increments of time and space made possible by the penetration of the fold. Her take on the 5th dimension. It takes, where is course winner? It takes humility. Not only imagination, but humility to understand that it's possible that you might be two-dimensional in a world that goes beyond two. That kind of humility enables us to know the truth about ourselves. Scott Black Johnston shared that one of his elders at Fifth Avenue brought him a pie chart. That pie chart that he had drawn himself, a tiny sliver of it was marked "What we know," and a larger but still small wedge he identified as "What we know that we don't know." And of course, the great majority of the pie was what we have no idea that we don't know. Which is again where our texts from the Psalms and Romans come in. It's trust. Imagination, it requires imagination to go beyond. It requires humility to go beyond and learn something from it. Finally, and most importantly, it takes trust for it to become real for us and enrich our lives. When we can hold imagination and humility together, it makes the unexplainable approachable. And what makes that an adventure instead of a fearful necessity is trust. Our brief statement of faith begins, "In life and in death we belong to God. We trust in the one triune God, the Holy One of Israel, whom alone we worship and serve." When we look at the experience of the people of faith that have been recorded in Scripture, when we remember our own past experiences with a God who loves us enough to join us on the journey, and who repeatedly tells us, "Don't be afraid, I am with you," we have every reason to believe that the God who has been good in the past will continue to be good in our future, whatever it may be. Thanks be to God.